Rabbi. Yeah, there you go.
Have you been up to this point?
Huh?
Have you been able to hear me at all up to this point?
Not at all. You were muted the whole time. Sorry, I was late. Otherwise, I would have cut it earlier.
No, great. So we're just starting a little late here.
It's all right.
Hold on one second.
Warm up.
Hold on. I'm gonna stop. All right. So here we go. We can do this again. So some technical difficulties. We didn't have the full 3 people we normally have to start to be able to spotlight video, and obviously that's gave some problems. So either way, we are talking about Lag BaOmer today instead of the week's Torah portion. And I want to talk a little bit about what Lag BaOmer is so that we can understand why we're looking at this text. So Lag BaOmer stands for the 33rd day of the Omer. Lag being Lamed Gimel, just like right here on the page, Lamed Gimel, that is 33, the numeric value of 33. So this is the 33rd day of the 7-week period from Passover to Shavuot, right? And we say that there are 2 different joyous occasions that are, or 2 events that occurred on this day that we mark. The first occasion is that up to this period of time, there had been this horrible plague 2,000 years ago, and thousands of Rebbe Akiva students had died in this plague. Miraculously, the plague stopped on Lag BaOmer, and so we kind of celebrate this as a joyous day. So up to this point, from Passover to Lag BaOmer, we don't allow there to be Jewish weddings or anything like that. A lot of people won't shave, and so Lag BaOmer all of a sudden becomes this joyous event. One of the students of Rebbe Akiva who survived the plague was Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai. And Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai happened to die on Lag BaOmer some future year. And because Rebbe Shimon was, he's considered to be the founder of Jewish mysticism and wrote the core text, which became the Zohar, the chief text of Kabbalah. And Zohar means kind of radiate or to shine. And so we celebrate Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai's Yahrzeit, the anniversary of his death, by celebrating Lag BaOmer with bonfires and whatnot. So I want us to take a look at a text from the Talmud that talks about who Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai was, so we understand why are we celebrating this guy today versus any other rabbi, for instance. So let's take a look at this text. This is coming from the Babylonian Talmud, from Tractate Shabbat. This is from Dapim 33 Bet through 34 Aleph. So here we have 4 people sitting around. Rebbe Yehuda, Rebbe Yosei, and Rebbe Shimon were sitting, and some other guy, not a Rebbe, Yehuda, the son of converts, sat beside them. Rebbe Yehuda opened and said, "How pleasant are the actions of this nation, the Romans, as they established marketplaces, established bridges, and established bathhouses." And Rebbe Yosei was silent. Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai responded by saying and said, "Everything that they established only for their own purposes. They established marketplaces to place prostitutes in them, bathhouses to pamper themselves, and bridges to collect taxes from all who pass over them." So Yehuda, the son of converts, went and related their statements to his household. And those statements continued to spread until they were heard by the Roman authorities. And they ruled and said, Yehuda, Rebbe Yehuda, who elevated the Roman regime, shall be elevated and appointed as head of the sages, the head of the speakers in every place. And we know Rebbe Yehuda is also known as Yehuda Hanasi, the prince or the chief of all the rabbis. Rebbe Yosei, who remained silent, shall be exiled from his home in Judea as punishment and sent to the city of Tzipori in the Galilee. And Shimon, who denounced the government, shall be killed. All right. So this is getting a sense of what's going on. Of course, having this decree of a death penalty imposed upon him, Rebbe Shimon freaks out and he flees. So let's see what happens here. So Rebbe Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, Rebbe Elazar, went and hid in the study hall. Every day, Rebbe Shimon's wife would bring them bread and a jug of water, and they would eat. When the decree intensified, Rabbi Shimon said to his son, "Women are easily impressionable, and therefore there is room for concern, lest the authorities torture her and she reveal our whereabouts." So they went and hid in a cave. And a miracle occurred, and a carob tree was created for them, as well as a spring of water. They would remove their clothes and sit covered in sand up to their necks. They would study Torah all day in that manner. And at the time of prayer, they would dress, cover themselves, and pray. And they would again remove their clothes afterwards. They would not become tattered. They sat in the cave for 12 years. Elijah the prophet came and stood at the entrance to the cave and said, "Who will inform Bar Yochai that the emperor died and his decree has been abrogated?" At this, Rabbi Shimon and his son Rabbi Elazar emerged from the cave, and they saw people who were plowing and sowing, engaged in worldly concerns. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, "These people abandon eternal life, that is Torah study, and they engage in temporal life for their own sustenance." The Gemara, or Talmud, relates that every place that Rabbi Shimon and his son Rabbi Elazar directed their eyes was immediately burned. And a divine voice emerged and said to them, "Did you emerge from the cave in order to destroy my world? Return to your cave." So we're going to pause here. And so, Aaron, I'm going to turn to you, as you are the only one who's able to be with us. You're going to have to unmute yourself. It looks like, again, some folks are texting me saying that they were not able to get in. Give me one moment. Okay. So, what is our understanding of Rabbi Shimon? Well, how would you describe him at this point?
Frustrated?
Frustrated. I mean, does come across as like a kind person?
Yeah, not kind of like maybe a little bit unreasonable. I mean, he was hidden for quite a long time and then came out swinging, basically criticizing everything that he sees and kind of instead of being appreciative, maybe he's a little unhappy. I don't.
Yeah, like he's this very kind of, I mean, he's an extremist, really, right? Like, you know, here, Rabbi Yehuda, who's this great rabbi, is sitting around saying, like, how great is all this stuff? Like, look at this. These people they invented aqueducts, and we have these like paved roads with colonnades on either side with, you know, with marketplaces. Like, this is a really kind of nice, you know, society that they've set up. And the Rabbi Shimon's response is, it's all just to stir themselves, right? He's a bit of a curmudgeon. And then he kind of takes this extremist view, saying like, there's nothing good at all about what they do. And then, right, this is dismissive of women. They're weak, and they could not possibly, you know, keep a secret if tortured. And then, right, he flees, and he's in hiding for 12 years, right? He spends that entire time engrossed in Torah study. I mean, he's really really extreme here. And then he comes out and he criticizes everybody else because they're like trying to live, right? Plowing and sowing. It's not like they are, you know, off gambling. Like, they're doing agriculture, right? They're doing what they need to do in order to survive. And yet, you know, he's criticizing them. He's been like, what he doesn't quite understand is that not everybody is able to live their lives completely dedicated to the study of Torah, right? It's like, it's impossible to actually spend all of your day, every day, like every year doing that, especially for 12 years. That's an incredible indulgence, right? To have engaged in. Yeah, Aaron, unmute yourself.
So, I mean, it's kind of interesting. We've had sort of like this resurgence in interest in sort of like Orthodox culture, thanks to Netflix and Shtisel and unorthodox and this sort of, you know, Jews looking at Jews kind of situation. I mean, even comments like Mayor de Blasio's in New York talking about the religious Jews and whatnot. It's almost kind of like this, and it sort of reminds me of the like the Nurya Karta not as well as the Satmars in not supporting the state of Israel. It's like look at all this stuff that it's all man-made. It's all it wasn't put into place by God. It wasn't a state put into place by God, etc. So I might be diving too deep, but that's kind of what I hear.
We wouldn't be doing what we're doing right now if it weren't for Israel with development of voice over IP, let alone video over IP, right? Like that is an Israeli invention, and somebody an extremist could come and say, who cares about all these people staying in contact, despite being in this pandemic? They should just have their nose in a book, studying, Gemara at home all day, and none of the stuff even matters. It's all frivolous, right? I mean,
and it's almost like here he says, look, I was thrown in a cave. Why aren't these people all fighting for me? Why aren't these people? All these people are going about their lives without me. They should be honoring me. It's very self-serving, self-centered. It feels like.
I think it's also this idea of like he's a zealot, right? I am zealous for Torah. Why? And I'm so zealous for Torah that I would flee, and to save my life, so that I could dedicate my life to the study of Torah. And here are these other people. They're not studying Torah. They're just going about doing this other stuff. Like, why everybody else should be just as zealous as I am for Torah, because Torah is this incredible blessing. And if you're not, then you're not worthy of living. And so they're just going to look everywhere and just destroy it, right? Yeah. Out of hyperbole in this language here. They don't really destroy it, maybe, right? But definitely from his own perspective, he's destroyed it. He's completely disregarded it. It's irrelevant. It's not worthy of his time. It's like, we're moving on, right? So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, not the kindest of guys. And what he's embracing right now, I happen to have this right by me. Right, he really is embracing this midah, this attribute of din over on this side. Din being this attribute of judgment, pretty much of like judgment, right? So let's get back to the text here. So Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Elazar return back to their cave. Well, let's see what happens. So they went again, and they sat for 12 months, not years, but 12 months. And they said, the judgment of the wicked in Gehenna lasts for 12 months. Surely their sin was atoned in that time. And by the way, a little side note here. We have this idea of the judgment of the wicked in Gehenna lasts for 12 months. This is why we only say Kaddish for 1 year. In fact, the idea is that if somebody is wicked, they are in Gehenna for 12 months. But if someone's a real tzaddik, there's no way they would have to be there for a full 12 months. They would only be there for 11 months. So actually, we only say Kaddish for 11 months. And then we just say the Kaddish on the first yard site, the 1 year anniversary. And we stop in that last month because, God forbid, we say that the people who we are mourning were truly wicked people, right? Truly wicked people have to last a full 12 months, but we want everybody else should go up to that 12 months. Right? That's just a little side note here. So they're there for 12 more months. And then a divine voice emerged and said to them, emerge from your cave. And they emerged. And everywhere that Rabbi Elazar would strike, Rabbi Shimon would heal. Meaning the exact same thing that happened before, right? Rabbi Elazar would look around, say it's so horrible what they're doing. He'd strike them down with his eyes. But Rabbi Shimon would reach out and he'd try to heal them. And Rabbi Shimon said to Rabbi Elazar, my son, you and I suffice for the entire world. Right? As the two of us are engaged in the proper study of Torah. And I'm thrilled to be able to welcome Rabbi Howard Tillman, or as he's known in my household, Rabbi Incredible. As Lev was just saying to me earlier, it's so cool that like a character from a movie that I really like is actually a real person too. As Rabbi Tillman often dresses as Mr. Incredible for Purim. All right. So, and here what he's saying is, listen, we can be zealous for Torah. Right? The rest of the world doesn't have to be. As long as the two of us are incredibly devoted to Torah, our learning and our love and our zealotry should be sufficient for the entire world. Let's not beat up all these other people. So he takes this complete 180 from where he was before. He was right on this place of real deen, of judgment, and now he's in this place of chesed, of loving kindness, of understanding, of compassion for the people. And so here we have an opportunity to actually see how he lives this. So as the sun was setting on Shabbat Eve, they saw an elderly man who was holding 2 bundles of myrtle branches and running at twilight. And they said to him, "Why do you have these?" And he said, "In honor of Shabbat." And they said to him, "Well, just let one suffice. You don't need 2 branches, just have one." And the old man said to them, "One of the branches is corresponding to Zachor at Yom HaShabbat, remember the Shabbat. And the other one is corresponding to Shamor at Shabbat, right? Observe, keep the Sabbath day, keep it holy." This is the reason, by the way, why we have 2 Shabbat candles. One is for Shamor, the other is for Zachor. So here's this old man, just going about his business, just as they were before. So Rabbi Shimon said to his son, "See how beloved the mitzvot are to Israel." Their minds were put at ease, and they were no longer as upset that people were not engaged in Torah study. So the idea here being like, yes, these people might be going about their lives and working, but right, they're not forgetting Judaism. They're not forgetting Torah. They're not forgetting God, right? They're going about their week, and they're going to pause and maybe get something special to bring home for Shabbat, right? Or remember to sing brachot or whatever it might be. Right? We should be a bit more patient in understanding and realize not everybody can be as zealous as we are. They are doing Judaism on their own terms, and that should be praiseworthy. Right? So open it up, and obviously Carol and Phil, you guys were able joined us somewhat late here. I don't know if you were able to hear anything. Yes, Carol?
I wasn't able to get on. I started to get on it before 2:00, and it kept being asked for a password, which I didn't have. And I was very frustrated.
Future weeks, just everybody needs to, the emails are going to be updated, but everything from all the links from the website are updated as well. Zoom changed all their rules this past weekend, requiring that every meeting have a password.
From my laptop and my iPad and from the email and from the website. So I'm glad I could join.
Yeah. So anyway, so what we see here is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai he's gone from this place of deen to this place of chesed, much more understanding, much more patient. But what's weird is, right, he's had 12 years in the cave the first time and came out still as much of a jerk as he was before. And then just 12 more months in the cave and made him completely change his approach, his attitude. So, so again, Phil and Hannah, the 2 of you joined us a bit more recently here, so you might not necessarily have as much insight here. But Aaron, I'm wondering if you might have some thoughts of what might have led Rabbi Shimon to have a change of heart.
I don't know. If God said you're being a schmuck and you need to go hide in the cave for 12 months, I think I would come out less of a schmuck.
You'd hope.
I would think, especially given these times that we're in now, which do allow for some level of introspection, being so isolated from people.
Right, and maybe there is something about that. Like I will say, it's been very difficult on our child being in isolation, and it wasn't so bad until her best friend had a birthday, and we drove over to the house, and they did this drive-by. So it was a drive-by celebration. So if we couldn't get out of the car, we couldn't actually she couldn't go up and hug her friend and play with him, and she was hysterical. It was killing her to see what she was missing out on. She realized she was missing out on it, and it completely changed her approach. And so maybe part of this is, right, Rabbi Shimon thought, well, 12 years, just me and my son in Torah, and that's all I need. I'm thrilled, I'm a happy guy. And then he comes out and he realizes, oh, there's this whole world that I'm missing. And the first time I was fleeing from the Romans, and now I'm actually not fleeing. I'm now being punished by God because I'm not appreciating what's there in front of me. And so like, I better really take a closer look at this text that I'm studying all the time and realize that it's about, right, engaging with the world. Right? And because that's really what the Torah is all about. Right? The Torah is about how to have a just society, right? How to 6 days you work, the 7th day you rest. It's not 7 days you study Torah, you have to work. So like maybe he wasn't actually paying close enough attention to the Torah as he should have been. Yeah, Carol.
I was just wondering, is it punishment or maybe God was sending him for rehab?
Oh, interesting. I mean, I think sometimes the two can be.
Rabbi. Yeah, there you go.
Right, like sometimes it's a matter of like, you know, you can be state ordered, like you have to go into rehab if you've, you know, DUI or something like that, right? Sometimes people go into rehab for their own wanting to grow and learn from it, but sometimes you're told you have to. And I think maybe that's what's going on here as well, in a way. But we are seeing like there being this wild transformation in him. Yeah, Phil.
So we missed the first part of the class. Are we studying Shimon ben Zachar because of its relationship to Lag BaOmer, or because it's related to the Torah portion, or the Haf? What is the reason we are studying Shimon ben Zachar?
Okay, Shimon bar Yochai. So as I said at the start, today is Lag BaOmer, and Lag BaOmer marks the yard site of Rabbi Shimon. So we're learning a bit about him, so we understand why are we celebrating him. Today of all days. So, okay, so we see this profound change, and he kind of continues living in the world a little bit. I'm going to skip this. If you go to Mishkon.org, to like where we have all the links and everything, and you download the PDF, you can see this. This is just a nice little story about Rabbi Shimon and his son-in-law, but it's not really relevant to our conversation right now. So, paying it forward. So now Rabbi Shimon has been out of the cave for a little bit. The first Shabbat, he engages with this, with this elderly man, and things are much better. So Rabbi Shimon said, "Since a miracle transpired for me, I will go and repair something for the sake of others, in gratitude for God's kindness, as it is written, and Jacob came whole to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram. And he graced the countenance of the city." I'm going to pause here. We're going to jump down a couple pages because I want us to actually look at that text. So this text comes from Genesis. This is right after Jacob and Esau reunite, and they rush towards one another, and they embrace one another, and they kiss, and they go their separate ways. 2 verses later, after all that's done, right, this is where we're at. So Jacob arrived shalem, whole or safe, in the city of Shechem, which is the land of Canaan, having come thus from Padan Aram, and he encamped before the city. So the word that we have here is vayichan et pnei ha'ir, right? Vayichan is the word machane, a camp, right? But it can also be related to the word chen, or grace, or chanan, right? Grace. And so the rabbis are playing with this word. What does vayichan et pnei ha'ir mean? So, and he encamped. This is coming from Torah Tamimah, which is a collection of where it's commentary on the Torah that tells you where certain verses are cited in rabbinic text, and then a little bit of explanation. And he encamped. The rabbis drash on the word vayichan, as I said. So how did he grace? Rav said he established for them coinage. Shmuel said he established for them marketplaces. Rabbi Yochanan said he established for them bathhouses. Regarding establishing marketplaces, he paid it forward, or did this repair, by selling things for free. And all of these things were due to feeling grateful and recognizing good for that place which welcomed him. Another understanding here of and he encamped. What did he do? He made booths and sold things in the marketplace for free. From here, we learned that we need to pay things forward like our ancestors did. That is, something to benefit a place which has welcomed us. Right? So this is a somewhat normative read of this verse. And what Rabbi Shimon is saying is like, I've now returned from where I was into this place which is controlled by the Romans, and they've welcomed me back. I'm not having to be killed anymore. Therefore, I need to repay them for welcoming back in and not doing me any harm. I want to embrace this lesson of Yaakov Avinu, of our ancestor Jacob. So now that we understand the citation, what he's referring to, let's go back up. So this right here, this paragraph, second paragraph, is only just summarizing what we just looked at. So I'm not going to go into that. So Rabbi Shimon said, is there something that needs repair? They said to him, there is a place where there is uncertainty with regard to ritual impurity, and the priests are troubled by being forced to circumvent it, as it is prohibited for them to become ritually impure from contact with a corpse. There's suspicion, but no certainty that a corpse was buried there. Therefore, they were unable to definitively determine its status. So here the idea is, and we saw this from this past week's Torah portion, a Kohen cannot be in a place where there is a corpse, a cemetery, like that. They can only do so, encounter a corpse, if it is their immediate family. Outside of that, they can't go there. So what's happening is the Kohanim are going all the way around this place, whatever it might be. And so Rabbi Shimon says, well, let's see if we can figure this out. So Rabbi Shimon said, is there a person who knows that there was a presumption of ritual purity here? Meaning, is there anyone who remembers a time when this place was not considered ritually impure, or that at least part of it was considered to be ritually pure? And an elderly man said to him, here, Ben Zakkai, Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai, planted and cut the truma of lupines. In this marketplace, Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai, who himself was a Kohen, once planted lupines that were given to him as truma. On that basis, the conclusion can be drawn that it definitely was ritually pure. Meaning this whole place, right, only in recent years could it have maybe developed some sort of ritual impurity, if we know that Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai hung out in this area, just a few decades earlier. So what did he do? Rabbi Shimon, like Jacob, also did so. And so he took steps to improve the city. He examined the ground. And everywhere that the ground was hard, he pronounced it ritually pure, as there was certainly no corpse there. And every place the ground was soft, he marked it, indicating that perhaps a corpse was buried there. In that way, he purified the marketplace so that even priests could walk through it. All right, so let's understand exactly what he's doing, right? He's going and he kind of hits the ground and the ground feels hard. It's like, no, that's really solid ground. It hasn't been disturbed in a long time. If the ground's a bit softer, it's like, well, this ground probably has been disturbed to be able to bury somebody there. So that soft little patch, the Kohanim are going to have to avoid. And one of the rabbis then said, they said, in fact, this wasn't just some field. This was actually a marketplace. Right? So here, the very thing that Rabbi Shimon was chastising earlier in the story, that he was saying, who cares about these marketplaces? The Romans only developed them to be able to put prostitutes there. Now he's saying, I'm going to make it ritually pure so that our Kohanim, of all people, can go into that marketplace. And he has done a complete 180, right? He's really trying to put this love back out into the world. Seems like he's really made a big change, right? Yes. Any questions up to this point? Okay. So let's go continue with the story and see what happens. So that same elderly man said in ridicule and surprise, Ben Yochai purified the cemetery. I'm like, yay, like, look what you were able to do. Meaning this wasn't just some random place. This was a cemetery. And you're going to go and declare this whole cemetery being pure. Right? It's a silly thing. So Rabbi Shimon got angry and said to him, had you not been with us? And even had you been with us and you were not counted with us in rendering this ruling, what you say is fine. You could have said that you were unaware of my intention or that you did not agree or participate in the decision. But now that you were with us and you were counted with us in rendering this ruling, you will cause people to say that the sages are unwilling to cooperate with one another. Meaning, when I asked if anybody recalled this place being considered pure, right? And you said, yes, Rabbi Yochanan Ben Zakkai used to hang out here, right? You could have also at that time said, but since then, we decided to use this place as a cemetery. And there are a lot of people buried here, right? You could have been helpful, but instead you're just being difficult and you're leading to some bickering here. So they will say, if competing prostitutes, again, going back to the idea of the marketplace and prostitutes and the Romans, if competing prostitutes still apply makeup to each other to help one another look beautiful, all the more so that Torah scholars should cooperate with one another, right? Which is, right? There are a lot of people in rabbinical school who kind of like compete with one another versus like myself and my classmates. We actually would share notes with one another. We would help one another study. Rabbi Tillman, who was just on here before, he and I were chatting earlier today about this story and helping one another kind of understand it, and some others. Like, that's what Torah scholars should be doing, not bickering and trying to drag the other down and making them look like a fool in front of people. So what did Rabbi Shimon do? He directed his eyes towards him, towards that elderly man, and the elderly man died. And Rabbi Shimon went out to the marketplace, and he saw Yehuda, the son of converts, the guy from the very beginning, who was the cause of the entire incident. Because if you remember, Yehuda, not Rabbi Yehuda, but Yehuda was the one who went and told the Romans, essentially, indirectly, about what Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said. And so Rabbi Shimon had to flee for his life. So it's this guy who's the whole cause of all of Rabbi Shimon's tsuris, right? And so Rabbi Shimon said, this one still has a place in the world. He hasn't died yet. So Rabbi Shimon directed his eyes towards him and turned him into a pile of bones, right? So it's like here we think Rabbi Shimon comes out of the world, comes out of the cave, this changed man. He went from this place of pure deen, of judgment, and emerged this, from his chrysalis, if you will, as this beautiful source of chesed, of loving kindness, of understanding, of compassion. And you think, right, he made this change. But in fact, he didn't. He emerged, and really the end of the story tells us. And after this, it goes back to another Mishnah. So this is the absolute end of the story. What emerges from the story is an understanding that actually Rabbi Shimon embraces both deen and chesed. Right? He realizes that you have to have both, which is really interesting, because if we go back to the citation from the Torah that we were looking at before, who does Rabbi Shimon try to base himself after? But it's after Yaakov Avinu, after Jacob. And what's special about Jacob? If we in the world of in Kabbalah and Chassidut, when we're looking at Avraham Avinu, if we're looking at Abraham, Abraham represents the idea of chesed, of just pure, or an ahava, right? Just pure love of God. Right? He's put all that into the world, and it didn't really stick so well. How do we know that it didn't stick so well? Because Yitzchak continued the tradition, right? But Ishmael didn't, right? It wasn't that persuasive of a theology, this one of love. And so then who do we get next? We get Yitzchak. And everything that describes Yitzchak is from this place of yirah, of fear. Right? And besides the fact of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac and all this other stuff, he lives this very kind of removed, shrunken life. And what he represents then is this idea of, this yirah, like this, or deen, if you will. Right? And Yaakov comes, and by the way, in the life of Yitzchak, all the wells that Abraham had dug up, those were filled in. And then Yaakov comes, and he redigs the wells that Abraham had dug. And what he really represents then is this kind of the balance between the two, right? And the problem with the Yirav, pure Yirav, as we see with Yitzchak, that Yaakov continues it, but Esav doesn't, right? And then we get Yaakov, and Yaakov represents the two, the balance between the Ahava and the Yirah, of the Chesed and the Din, this balance in between. And what do we see with Yaakov? We see that all of his children continue the tradition. Right? We see with, when we say the Shema, and then after the Shema, we have that one little line that we say quietly, Baruch Shem Kavodu Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. The Midrash, and that little line doesn't appear in Deuteronomy where we actually see the words of the Shema, because it goes straight from Shema into V'ahavta. And so there's a midrash. It says, right, Shema Yisrael, listen Israel, or listen Jacob, Adonai Eloheinu, God is our God, Adonai Echad, God is one. Meaning we all 12 of us, all 12 of your sons, we are all kind of unified in our belief of God. Unlike the generations before us, we are all in this together. And hearing this, Jacob says, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. Blessed is God's, greatness. So here we have, like, Jacob is Yisrael. We are Bnei Yisrael. Jacob represents the beginning of our tradition. Really, tradition, going from beta into tradition 1.0. And then we have Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who established rabbinic Judaism. It's like Judaism 2.0. And then what we have is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who takes it a little bit further and gives us this new understanding from a perspective of Jewish mysticism and writing the core text, which became the Zohar. And in a way, he gives us Judaism 3.0, this new understanding of Judaism. And so the reason why we celebrate Lag BaOmer, why we celebrate the yard site of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, is because, right, we're celebrating this new understanding of Torah that he's introduced into the world. Right, you cannot approach it from a place entirely of Deen. We see how destructive that is, and he was forced to go, live in a cave because of that. And you also can't come at a place of complete Chesed, because there'd be some problems with that as well. But instead, we have to have this place of balance between the two. And so he teaches us, right, the beauty that comes from balance. And as we see, right, we have the Chesed over here, and then we have the Din over here, and right between the two, connecting them, is Tiferet. And Tiferet also connects the Netzach, right, as well as the Hod being the week that we're in right now. And so again, the Tiferet is representing that balance between them all. And we don't just say, Tiferet is usually beauty, how it's translated, but it also represents harmony or balance. And this idea that it's through balance that we see beauty and we see splendor in the world. So by the way, and we also wouldn't have any of this if it wasn't for the work of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, anyways, establishing Kabbalah for us. So this is why we are marking his yard site and celebrating his life and his Torah this day. So, and any questions, thoughts, comments on any of this stuff here? So, yeah, Carol.
There was one section where you were saying that that this guy was fixing up the marketplace and that he was selling things for free. Why didn't they just say that he was giving things away rather than he was selling them for free? Or is that the translation?
Well, there are a few different things, but mochrin is the word that's used in the Mishnah Hebrew. Mocher, it means to sell things, to be like a trader. But also there's a concept, like all those who are hungry come and buy bread for free. It's this idea of like, there's an exchange that has to take place. And so it's really talking about this exchange versus just giving something away. Giving away is like tzedakah. It's almost like I'm giving you like free samples, right? It's like, I want to establish a relationship with you. This will be a business that is set up. Actually, one of the commentaries also says it wasn't just they set up one little booth and was selling stuff for free, but rather he also established the idea of one company having multiple booths at different places around a city. And right, so again, it's like giving out free samples so people know who you are, so that they will maybe encounter you again at a later date, and you're trying to, inspire them. And when I read that, I think of the Shuk in Jerusalem, and there's a place called Mamlechet Halava, or the Halava like kingdom, and there's always these guys in the middle of the Shuk saying like Halava, Halava, and you come and you get your free sample, and it's delicious, and you pass this huge thing, and like, oh, I'm not going to buy anything right now, and you go about 100 feet further, and there's another little booth. Like, you know what? I'm going to buy some halava. We'll have a nice little dessert for Shabbos this week, right? And so they're saying that's what he established. So by kind of giving something out there, you're enabling the ability to then enter into business with people as well. So, yeah. Phil, you had your hand up as well.
I want to go back to the graveyard. So he was sort of, when he came, he was trying to relax the rules for the Kohanim, and that was considered chesed. I mean, there was very specific laws about the Kohanim not being allowed into the graveyard unless it was for a very close relative, right? Am I correct on that?
Well, so he wasn't relaxing the rules for the Kohanim. What he was doing, had he known that it was in fact a graveyard, would be different than it just being a field where maybe there were a few different people who were buried. There's definitely a difference between the two. If it were a graveyard, you probably wouldn't have done that anyway. So he said, it's a graveyard, you can't use it. But what he was doing is not trying to relax the rules for the Kohanim, but rather make the world more accessible for them. Now, understanding the later text, the text that comes after, saying that in fact, it wasn't just a field, but it was actually a marketplace, which could also be like just a large field that maybe certain days of the week people come and they set up their booths there, and they sell their wares, their food, whatever it might be, and that's what makes it a marketplace. And so it was that the Kohanim couldn't go in there at all; they couldn't participate. And we know Kohanim don't have land of their own, so they have to rely on being able to buy produce from others, and therefore. They were really being left out from society. So here, what he was doing was making way for everybody to be able to come in and be part of society. But what's really interesting about what he was doing there is not just that he's making this more accessible for the Kohanim, but the very thing that he was dismissing as frivolous at the beginning of the story, he's now trying to make accessible to everybody. He's passed off marketplaces as being filled with prostitutes, just to put more money in the pockets of the Romans. And now he's saying marketplaces are good, and even our Kohanim should be able to go in there to be able to, do this. And he really took this complete 180 in that way. So he's, yeah.
How did the holiday then evolve into a celebration? I mean, I know what we're celebrating the balance between Gevura and Chesed, but I memean, it's odd on a person's death that you would have all this celebratory singing, you light bonfires, you go out on the beach. I mean, is there something else going on here in addition to celebrating his yahrzeit?
Traditionally, we don't know when people are born, right? Unless they are like a prince, or they are the child of a really great rabbi or somebody who's really well known. Then we might know when they were born, but for the most part, we don't know when people are born. But if they, rise up in society and achieve greatness in their lives, then we sure as heck know when they die. And so traditionally Judaism, we don't celebrate people's birthdays, we celebrate the yahrzeits. And the yahrzeit is not a sad thing in Judaism. The yahrzeit is an opportunity to be able to celebrate the life that was. And so if he brought light into the world through Torah, and as we know, well, another word for Torah is Eish Kodesh, right? This holy fire, right? Or this light shining upon us. We are going to celebrate the light that he brought into the world through his teaching, and we do so through bonfires. So it's not a strange. It may be strange to more Western mentality, but from a Jewish perspective, it's just what we do. Yeah. And if you ever are in Israel, when it is Lag BaOmer, not during a pandemic, you go up to Merom in the Galil, and everybody goes to Kever Rashbi, to the grave of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and there are, hundreds or thousands of people gathered there. And there are bonfires, and there are people singing, and there's actually a little mikveh right by there as well that people will go and immerse in. It's really a wild experience. And just around the rest of the country, right, there are bonfires everywhere. It's not even just about Rashbi at this point, right? It's just a nice day that we celebrate as well. And I remember my mother saying one year, she was either flying into or out of Ben Gurion on Lag BaOmer in the evening. And she said you could see all these bonfires, just like from the window of the airplane as they're, relatively close to the ground. You could just see little bonfires scattered all over the country. It was really cool to see. So yeah, I mean, this is a guy who shows us that, it's never too late to make tshuva. You can change your attitude to realize that, right, Torah isn't something that you should be doing study is not something you should be doing 24/7. That it's not reasonable to expect that of anybody, but we should be living our lives guided by Torah for those moments when we're able to spare to engage in Torah study. And as Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel points out to us, it is a positive mitzvah. 6 days you shall work. It's not just that you could, it is a positive commandment. You must work 6 days, and on the 7th day you rest. So here he'd been dismissive of all these people who were working and thinking they're just being frivolous, and realizing, oh no, actually they're embracing the Torah much more than I am by just studying it all day, every day. There was a fantastic advertising campaign by Masorti Judaism in Israel about, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, where they recreated like yellow pages. And on the pages, the yellow pages, they showed all these different professions. And under the professions, they listed the names of all these great rabbis from the Talmud who we knew like that was their profession. Whoever was a carpenter or who was a vintner or whatever. And it was like plastered all over Israel, specifically Jerusalem. And the idea is like all these Haredim who are just living off the state and using the money and that support to be able to like study in kollel all day, every day, and not actually earning money. It's like, you're not actually doing what the Torah and what the Talmud wants us to be doing. Right? That is not Judaism. That is zealotry. That's what Rashbi does. And even Rashbi himself said, it should be sufficient if just 2 of us are doing this. We don't need the whole world to do this. As long as a few people are doing it, great. But we don't need an entire neighborhood or neighborhoods of Jerusalem to be doing this and living off of the state. So I thought it was a brilliant advertising campaign. And a lot of the Chilonim appreciate it, even if it wasn't terribly effective at achieving any real change. So, all right, I'm going to say farewell to those who are with us on Facebook and